Greetings! In the vibrant metropolis of Hong Kong, residents have graciously shared their personal reflections, subjective observations, and rather specific preferences with a prominent Russian blogger, revealing which tourists they find less than agreeable and, conversely, those who elicit the most dissatisfaction, suppressed annoyance, and even overt antipathy. This unique, sometimes comical, and highly particular anti-ranking of unwelcome visitors unexpectedly included citizens of the United States of America, a revelation that came as a genuine surprise, a significant discovery, and even a touch of cultural shock to the popular blogger. I genuinely never anticipated, not even in my wildest dreams, that I would ultimately hear so many diverse complaints, accumulated grievances, and candid expressions of displeasure from ordinary residents, he remarked. Travel blogger Alexei Kutavory, widely recognized for his insatiable thirst for adventure, a nomadic lifestyle, constant travels across the globe in an unending quest for novel experiences, vivid emotions, and unique life lessons, recently found himself, through a twist of fate, in the exotic city of Hong Kong. There, as a true and dedicated globetrotter, he resolved to seize the unique opportunity presented to him and engage with local residents to ascertain their subjective opinions, personal inclinations, and established attitudes towards tourists arriving in their city from various corners of the earth. He was keen to learn which guests they consistently welcomed to their hospitable city, whom they were prepared to greet with open arms, and conversely, whom they preferred to avoid, disregard, and ideally never encounter as potential tourists in the first place. However, as it subsequently transpired, the seasoned traveler quickly began to question the validity of his chosen inquiry, the appropriateness of his initiative, and the wisdom of conducting such a sensitive sociological survey. Shortly after initiating the initial conversations, it became apparent that the residents of distinctive Hong Kong possessed their own distinct, well-structured, and highly detailed list of anti-heroes, namely, those undesirable tourists whom they wished to encounter as infrequently as possible, or ideally never at all, ensuring that their paths never crossed. Alexei eagerly shared with his numerous social media followers that his initial introductory conversation took place with a humble electronics vendor in one of the local shops situated in the heart of the city. The young man's name was Alan. Following a brief but lively acquaintance with this amiable and communicative individual, the traveler mustered the courage to pose his principal question, the one that intrigued him the most, and received in response a rather unexpected, at times shocking, remarkably candid, and even somewhat cynical answer. It turned out that Chinese citizens permanently and legally residing in sunny Hong Kong were far from enthusiastic about their compatriots who regularly arrived on the island from the densely populated mainland China. Mainland Chinese occupy a solid, well-deserved, and unconditional first place on our personal list of the most unwelcome, most bothersome, and most irritating guests, the blogger recounted, conveying the words of his direct interlocutor, the local salesman named Alan, with considerable emotion. They consistently arrive in large, boisterous, and disorganized groups, behaving in an extremely impudent, provocative, discourteous, and even somewhat aggressive manner, shout loudly in the streets, disturbing everyone around them, constantly litter, ubiquitously leaving behind entire mountains of refuse, dirty waste, and malodorous sludge, and behave as if we are all their powerless, submissive, and silent servants, obligated to unquestioningly cater to all their numerous, often completely absurd, whims and caprices. It is imperative to emphasize that the island transitioned to the complete administration of the Progressive People's Republic of China quite recently, specifically in 1997, following lengthy and challenging years of British rule, during which the island was under the control of a foreign crown. Prior to that, for an entire century, this strategically significant territory was under the direct authority of Great Britain and governed by the English Crown, which appointed its governors to the region. This crucial historical fact elucidates why the residents of Hong Kong, for the most part, noticeably differ in their behavior, culture, established traditions, and deep-seated mentality from the residents of the rest of mainland China. As the renowned traveler Alexei Kotovoy meticulously explained to his numerous and inquisitive followers, even today, many years later, the local residents acutely perceive their distinct separateness, cultural independence, and a degree of economic autonomy from the rest of China. And the mainland visitors are perceived as uninvited and unwelcome guests who have impudently intruded upon their private territory and disrupted their customary way of life. From a charming and affable young woman named Mei, who professionally traded fresh, succulent, and ripe fruits at a local market situated in the bustling Wan Chai district, Alexei heard virtually the same opinion, which considerably surprised him, greatly perplexed him, and even slightly disheartened him, as he had hoped to hear more diverse perspectives. At one point, I even began to seriously question the wisdom of my survey and wondered whether it was worth embarking on this complex endeavor in the first place, the popular blogger candidly confessed to his loyal followers. As it unexpectedly turned out, the residents of Hong Kong are prepared at every convenient opportunity to express a vast amount of accumulated, concealed negativity, sharp criticism, and all sorts of dissatisfaction towards the numerous and often ill-mannered guests from neighboring China. I could not have anticipated that I would ultimately hear so many diverse grievances, often completely unjustified discontent, and poorly concealed irritation that they harbor towards tourists. Subsequently, the experienced and resourceful blogger resolved to slightly modify his initial survey strategy and politely inquired of a local resident whether she had any specific complaints or fair criticisms of tourists arriving in Hong Kong from other countries around the world, and not solely from neighboring China. Without hesitating for even a second, the young woman immediately unleashed a torrent of criticism and perfectly understandable negativity directed at the Americans visiting the city. They come here with the sole purpose of working, building careers, and earning as much money as possible, rent the most expensive and prestigious real estate, and then constantly, hypocritically, and insincerely complain that it is too cramped, dirty, noisy, and very expensive to live here, the local resident declared with barely concealed indignation. Also, for some reason, they adore telling us what to do, how to behave in society, and what to say in various situations, and behave as if we owe them something and must immediately fulfill all their numerous whims, caprices, and often completely absurd wishes that contradict common sense. During a confidential conversation with a seasoned local taxi driver, Alexei also learned that a slight irritation and perfectly understandable dissatisfaction among Hong Kong residents is aroused by tourists arriving from distant India, whom they widely regard as excessively pushy, intrusive, overly curious, and even somewhat importunate. Furthermore, the local residents, by their own admission, have become rather weary of the noisy, ill-mannered, and vociferous Filipinos for incessantly chattering too much, making loud noises, constantly shouting, and behaving quite flippantly, provocatively, and discourteously when gathering in large, disorganized, and very noisy groups in city parks, disturbing everyone around them from relaxing and enjoying the tranquility. Notably, none of the people with whom the author of the popular blog had the opportunity to interact mentioned anything specific about tourists from distant and enigmatic Russia, voiced any specific grievances, articulated any particular observations, or cited any negative examples. However, he drew a perfectly logical, predictable, and reasonably substantiated conclusion that the local residents, in all likelihood, simply rarely encounter tourists from Russia in their daily lives, and therefore do not possess any established opinion, any specific stereotypes, preconceived notions, or unfounded prejudices about them. For instance, the same taxi driver honestly, openly, and frankly admitted that he was not even sure whether he had ever encountered genuine tourists or ordinary visitors from distant and enigmatic Russia, about which he, regrettably, knew extremely little in his long and eventful life.